Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you're calling from. My name is Jaime Sullivan, and I am the manager for the National Center for Rural Road Safety. And welcome to our February webinar entitled Bridging the Gap, a recap of the Safety Summit number 2. To get us started, I'm going to go ahead and close out all of these poll questions and give everyone a little bit of information about this. It looks like, as always, we have most of you joining us in a room by yourself, but we do have a few of you joining us in a group of 2 to 3 people. I will give further instructions in just a minute on how to get us your names and email addresses for registration purposes. It also looks like we have a good cross-section from across the U.S. today. We have about 47% from the Midwest, 31% from the West, about 13% from the Northeast, and about 9% from the Southeast joining us today. We also have, as far as our organizations go, we have about 15% from federal DOT, about 20% from state DOT, about 18% joining us from local transportation departments, about 6% from tribal governments. We have about 12% from other federal, state, or local government agencies, about 6% from universities, and about 20% from private consultants, and a few of you in there choosing other as your category. We also have most of you joining us on the computer only. As always, I will remind you that if you do have any issues with the audio for today's webinar, that the phone number is in the top left-hand corner, and you are able to call in if you do have any audio issues. You may also chat with the hosts, either of the WTI staff members, and we will be able to try and help you out with any audio issues that you may have for today. So I'm going to go ahead and move us over to the presentation now. So just a few more webinar logistics that we go through on each of our webinars. Today's will be about an hour and a half long. We are recording it, and it will be available on our website on our archive trainings page in about a week. For quality of the recording, as always, we have muted all phone lines during the presentation. Because of this, we'll also mention to you that if you are listening by phone, if you could please mute your computer speakers, otherwise you'll hear some feedback. And also for our question and answers periods, which there will be 5 of today, you can feel free to put any questions you may have in the chat pod. And again, you don't need to wait until we do hit that question and answer period. You may put those questions in there at any time, and when we do stop, we'll go ahead and scroll through those questions and answer each one individually. There is also going to be a time when we do play a video today, and at that time, if it is more convenient for you to have the PowerPoint at full screen, you can do so by pressing the 4 arrows that point outwards in the top right-hand corner of your screen, and that would make the video full screen and get rid of all of the extraneous information on the left and bottom side of your screen that you have right now. There is also a handout pod in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, and we'll talk a little bit more about those 2 handouts that are down there in a little bit, but you may want to download those. And as always, we will have follow-up surveys. We have 2 that come out, one directly following today's webinar and one that will come out in about 3 months. The one directly following today's webinar, you can find the link on your screen right now as well, just in case it does go to your junk mail when it comes to your inbox. There is also this link on the PDF version of today's slides, which is in the handouts that you can find in the bottom left-hand corner. And that survey is the way that you request both CEUs and a certificate of completion. And just a reminder that CEUs can be translated into professional development hours, the PDHs that many engineers need as well. Those certificates and CEUs come about 3 to 4 weeks after a webinar. It does take us 2 weeks to close out the survey, and then we manually make each of these certificates and manually send each one out. You can also request a verification of completion form for all CEUs that you have received from Montana State University. And I'm going to show you what that looks like. You can request this from continuing ed at montana.edu, and they'll send you that bottom right-hand document, and that would have any and all CEUs that you have requested for any of the Safety Center's webinars or for either of the 2 summits that you may have attended, as long as you filled out those forms. As always, the CEUs are free for you guys to request as well. And for today's presentation, we do have two presenters. Our first presenter is Hillary Isebrands. She is with the FHWA Resource Center. She has contributed to the transportation profession for over 20 years. She has expertise as a roadway design and safety engineer, as well as a traffic engineer and transportation researcher. Hillary is currently a senior roadway safety engineer and team leader with FHWA Resource Center Safety and Design. As part of this 16-person national team, she provides safety and design technical assistance, deploys current design and safety technologies, and provides project reviews to FHWA's internal and external customers. She specializes in roundabouts and local and rural road safety and design. Hillary also oversees the National Center for Rural Road Safety, a MAP 21 Center of Excellence. Prior to working with FHWA, Hillary conducted research at Iowa State University at their Center for Transportation Research and Education. She performed research in the areas of rural roundabouts and intersections, as well as pedestrian and traffic safety. Hillary is a professional engineer in Iowa and Wisconsin, a National Highway Institute certified instructor, and has her bachelor's, master's, and PhD in civil engineering. And then the second presenter will be myself, Jaime Sullivan. I am the Center Manager for the National Center for Rural Road Safety. I'm also a research engineer for the Western Transportation Institute at Montana State University for the past 17 years. I run the Public Lands Transportation Fellows Program, and I'm also the Principal Investigator for the NCHRP Rural Transportation Research Roadmap. I have a bachelor's and a master's in transportation engineering, and I'm also a licensed professional engineer in the state of Montana. Once you have completed this webinar, you will have an understanding of the second National Summit on Rural Road Safety called Bridging the Gap, on our outcomes and our most important takeaways from the summit. To achieve this webinar, we are going to have 5 different sections that we'll talk about today. And those will include to summarize why rural road safety should be a priority, to identify the successes in moving rural America since our first summit, to restate the resources for implementing safety measures at home, to understand the key takeaways from our 10 concurrent sessions, and to list the next steps and action items. And to get us started, I'm going to hand the presentation over to Hillary.
Thank you so much, Jaime, and hello to everyone out there. Happy to be with you today to talk a little bit about the National Summit on Rural Road Safety that was conducted in December of 2018. So one of the things, I know there's quite a few people on the call, and as we're going through this, if you by chance happen to be there in person, and you want to provide your input or feedback at any point in time when myself or Jaime are talking, please feel free to add your comments in the chat pod, because we would love to get perspective from some of the folks that perhaps were able to participate during the summit in the December timeframe. So I'll just offer that up right off the bat. And actually, I think, Jaime, as we get started here, I think we've got a poll question to kick us off as well. All right, so there's the poll question. It says, what are your rural road safety challenges in your jurisdiction? So again, you can go ahead and you can type in the poll pod there, and we'll be able to take a look at what some of the issues that you might be dealing with on a regular basis. As Jaime mentioned, we've got folks from both local agencies and state DOTs. We'll get hopefully a broad range of answers here. So intersection safety, funding, that's always a great question to talk about. Narrow shoulders, limited sidewalks, identifying problem locations. Keep scrolling down here. Run off the road crashes, yes, fixed object crashes. Lots to talk about related to funding. Small population and scattered crashes, right? So they're chasing the crashes sometimes in rural areas. They're not maybe at hot spots, but they're perhaps happening at locations that might have similar features or characteristics. For example, maybe on curbs or rural intersections. We oftentimes know that those are high-risk locations. Great answers, everyone. Thank you for sharing. Severe weather. These are some really good ideas, and if you've got that opportunity, Dana, are we able to, can everyone see those? Can we broadcast the results? There we go. I just want to give you all an opportunity to take a look at what some of the other folks are saying too, and perhaps that will generate some conversation in the chat pod. I see Joanne was able to add some information or add a comment in the chat pod, because it helps us to understand and to come together and be able to identify noteworthy practices. And that's part of really the reason for the summit, is to come together and learn from each other. We were able to learn from our other partners and stakeholders, and maybe really broaden our perspective on rural road safety. So thank you, Dana, for going ahead and broadcasting those results. And I'll continue on with the presentation here now. All right, so I'm going to talk just in general to kick us off, just to get us on the same page related to rural road safety. So why is rural road safety important? I think we've got some statistics right there, but really we historically, crashes on rural roadways has been about 50% of our fatal crashes nationally. In 2017, the numbers that have come out through NHTSA, it was, again, really close to about 50%. I think it dropped down to actually 49% rural, 51% urban. But that typically has been tracking around 50% plus or minus for many, many years. And the challenge is, as many of you pointed out, when in rural environments, is they can be scattered. And so where do you invest? And again, working together through engineering, through education and enforcement, and then working with our communities becomes really, really important. So about 19% of our populations live in rural areas, and we also have about 30% of miles driven in rural areas. So there's an interesting dynamics when you look at the statistics in terms of the population and the number of miles that are driven in the rural areas, and then you look at the number of fatal and serious crashes that are occurring on the rural system. And this both, and again, does include state highways, local roadways, tribal roadways, as well as the federal land roadways when we're looking at this. So it's really important that we pay attention to all of the roadway network, whether it be urban, suburban, and rural in those transition areas, and make sure that we are aware of what strategies are working. And Jamie is going to talk a little bit about that theme in terms of doubling down on what works. So the rural story. So just want to share, again, some additional numbers with you, get a little bit deeper into the rural story. And I already mentioned that about approximately 17,000 rural roadway deaths occurred in 2017. But when you drill down a little bit further in terms of what that means that about 47 rural roadway deaths occur each day. And during this webinar, about between 90 minutes and 120 minutes, over a 2-hour period, about 2 rural roadway deaths will occur. So think about that. And again, I'm not pointing to a particular, whether that's local or a state roadway, but I think that's important for us to understand the magnitude. And for those of you that do own rural roadways, you can use your data to help you tell that story. What is the rural story in your jurisdiction? How many crashes, how many fatal crashes, how many severe injury crashes are occurring on your rural roadways? And oftentimes when we talk in the rural environment, oftentimes we know those folks. When you talk at the county level or at the township level or at the tribal land level, that can be something that really can be game changing. So telling the story, and it's telling the story not only to each other, is telling the story to our stakeholders, to the public, to our decision makers, to make sure that they understand how we need to look in terms of prioritizing our investments when it comes to safety. So talking a little bit more about maybe the difference between rural and suburban or urban type issues. Oftentimes in the rural area, we're overcoming the urban bias. So one of the things that actually was talked about quite a bit in the 2016 National Summit on Rural Road Safety was not looking through an urban lens when we're talking about the rural story. It's really making sure that we're understanding what the issues are, what the resources are, and applying those appropriately. It's being aware and understanding the needs. And again, oftentimes this means understanding the needs on perhaps a state system and on the local system. Because when we talk rural, that is very cross-cutting. Any agency can own, a rural roadway and operate and maintain that. And so, and we really identify that there are differences sometimes in terms of what might be occurring, say, on a state highway that might have 10,000 ADT versus on a local rural roadway that might have 1,000 ADT. And so we need to be mindful of that and aware of what the differences are. It's important to articulate the consequences that if there's no action in the rural areas, that it can affect everyone. We know that a lot of folks, even though they may not live in a rural area, they come to the rural areas to recreate. That's where a lot of our parks, are not only national parks, but state parks and county parks. Lots of folks, when it comes summertime, are doing a lot of road trips. I just got back from a 9-hour trip to Wyoming, and 2-lane rural roads the entire way from my house to my destination. And so that dynamic is really important that we, even if you live in a non-rural area, oftentimes you are experiencing it, and you would want to experience it in a safe way. The last comment I'm going to make here is really create a unified voice for rural interests. And Jaime's going to talk a little bit more about some of the things that are going on both at the national level and at the local level related to having that unified voice when it comes to rural interest, rural solutions, rural strategies. And coming together and working as a team can allow us to make greater strides. So some additional kind of, I guess, themes, if you will, as we talk about the rural story, is oftentimes it's those personal relationships. A lot, the smaller the area, the more people know each other. They've been around sometimes a very, very long time. I think about my childhood growing up in rural Wisconsin, but visiting where my grandma lived in rural Iowa. And everyone waved at everyone, and everyone drove a pickup truck. Those relationships really are important, and those relationships that we need to have with not only community members but decision makers is so important when we're trying to turn the tide on rural road safety. Oftentimes resources become scarce. We've got folks that are wearing a lot of different hats. They might be plowing the roadway, they're grading the roadway, they're also maybe the road supervisor in that local jurisdiction. So it's important to understand that we have to be mindful of how we're spending our dollars, and so looking towards solutions that are low cost, perhaps some low-hanging fruit, and knowing where our risks are can help us make good decisions. The risks are different, and you guys pointed out several of those right off the bat. Curves, intersections, the randomness of crashes. It's really becomes important to know your area and know what the risks are, and then be able to find solutions. Varying road conditions, I saw some people had posted in there, weather related, and just sometimes just, the terrain and just what you're dealt with from Mother Nature out there can pose risks and challenges for us. Animal crashes, although they also do occur in suburban and transition type areas, tend to be more prevalent in the rural environment, and that is a dynamic that many agencies deal with in terms of awareness to the drivers, but also being mindful of how we do impact migration, where we put roads, where we put development can really affect where deer, elk, moose, and other animals are traveling near our roadways. So again, many of you know this. My guess is if you're on this call, you obviously have an interest in rural, and you understand what the challenges are. So one of the quote that actually was spoken at the 2016 summit, and we tend to be using more regularly now when we're working on some efforts on local road safety plans and working with the National Association of County Engineers, is a quote from Theodore Roosevelt, and that's do what you can with what you have where you are. Hopefully empowering each and every single one of us that do what we can in the name of rural road safety with what we have. So say our budget is small, but yet we do have a budget. Be mindful of how we're using those dollars and doing it with, don't wait around for the state or federal highways to maybe provide something. Do what you can with perhaps your maintenance forces and the resources that you have with the projects that you have planned in your rural areas. So it's really, I know that I have taken this to heart, even in what I do day to day, is trying to make an impact with the resources that I have as an individual who works for federal highways. So again, I hope this quote might resonate with some of the others that are on the call today. So Jaime, I think we're maybe going to pause here and take a look at some of the questions in the chat pod or comments that we have in the chat pod.
We are, yes. So for anyone who may have questions so far for Hillary, you can put those into the chat pod over on the left-hand side. I am going to move us over to another poll break as well while we're waiting for that, and we're going to test you guys. So rural road safety should be a priority because although 19% of population lives in rural areas, 49% of the fatalities occur there. It takes almost 2 times as long for emergency responders to get to a rural crash. 1 death is 1 too many. That life is just important in a rural area as in an urban area. We won't get to 0 if we ignore rural safety. All of the above, none of the above, or I don't know, I don't remember. And we'll give everyone just a few seconds to go ahead and fill that out. Okay, and it does look like everyone's had a chance. I'm going to go ahead and broadcast those results for you, Hillary.
All right, thanks, Jaime. Yeah, it looks like most of you got it. Really, it is all of those wrapped into one. So there's so many reasons why rural road safety should be a priority at all levels, really, of government. And we know that the challenges are significant, but I think, again, working together, we know that we can hopefully get to 0. And we can make a big difference in the rural road area. So we'll let this the presentation come back up here. All right. So I'm going to go ahead. I don't see any questions in the chat pod, so I'm going to go ahead and move on to talking a little bit about some of the successes since the Moving Rural America Summit. So that was the National Summit on Rural Road Safety that occurred in September of 2016. I just want to share some of the things that have been happening in the rural area, and really in the last 10 to 15 years, as we are getting more attention on road to 0, moving towards zero deaths, and what that means from state to state might be a little bit different, but we know that we have to do it together. So I'm going to talk a little bit about bringing rural issues to the forefront of planning and creating and promoting ready-to-use strategies and resources. So grabbing things that work, borrowing it from our colleagues and our friends and our neighbors, not having to reinvent the wheel. So this is just making some strides. So these are just some highlights, a timeline looking back on how we've been looking. And of course, those of you who live in rural areas, you've been living, breathing rural road safety for your entire careers or your entire lives if you live in those areas as well. You know what it means when we're talking about some of the issues. So just going back to about 2005, the center that preceded the center that Jaime is involved with here was the Center for Excellence in Rural Safety, CEUs, out of the University of Minnesota. That was established in 2005 and was working towards rural issues through 2013. In 2009, Towards Zero Deaths was born. That was an AASHTO discussion, and I believe I understand that actually in Savannah, Georgia in 2009, they came together to move forward with the Towards Zero Deaths initiative here in the United States. December 2014, the National Center for Rural Road Safety, who's sponsoring this webinar here today, was established. In July of 2015, there was a resolution to improve safety on county roads through the U.S. Department of Transportation and the Secretary of Transportation at that point in time. And then in 2016, there was the National Working Summit on Transportation in Rural America. Now, Jaime is going to talk about some other initiatives a little bit later, but that just gives you an idea of how I think we have an increase in awareness of what's going on in the rural areas and how it does need to be treated differently than the urban areas if we are going to make strides. There was a call to action at that summit in 2016, and we had a couple of folks. We had Shaylin Bott, who was the executive director at Colorado DOT at that time. That particular summit was held in Denver, Colorado. He spoke about how, for Colorado, they have two goals: to save people's lives and make people's lives better. And from a rural perspective, we have a lot we can do, and shame on us if we don't try something new. That was a really great statement that Shaylin made back in 2016. I've quoted him several times, but really it's telling us that we need to be innovative. We need to step outside of our comfort zone when we're trying to tackle issues that have maybe been stagnant for a long time, and really empowering us to do things differently to try to make a difference. We also had an opportunity to hear from Cindy Bobbitt, who was at that time, the NACO Executive Committee President or Vice President. I can't recall at this moment what she was when she was there in September of 2016. But she was actually also a commissioner, if I'm not mistaken, Jaime. She was a commissioner in El Paso County, Colorado at that point in time. Effective collaboration and communication among community and safety stakeholders are necessary in order to achieve ambitious yet achievable safety goals. So again, having our leadership, and in this case it was someone from the National Association of County Officials that NACE is also affiliated with, as well as a director of a DOT, talking about how rural issues are very, very important and how we need to come together to achieve success. So in bridging the gap for rural roadway safety, some of the rural efforts that need to continue and need to be in the forefront are data, improving how we get access to data, and that could be crash data, that could be maintenance logs, that could be anecdotal information from the community, it could be from road safety audits. It's really important that we're using data to drive our decisions. It makes it easier for us oftentimes if we are able to base our decisions on data versus my opinion and your opinion and someone else's opinion, but using the information that we have, the data that we have, to be solid on what we're suggesting we invest in. The encouragement of local road safety plans, and that has been something, every state DOT has a strategic highway safety plan, and what we're trying to look at is make more progress in the area of having local jurisdictions. Now local, it might be an MPO, an RPA, a county, a township, a city, but really highlighting the importance of having a plan, and Jamie's going to share a slide a little bit later about more about what we're doing with local road safety plans to try to encourage a strategy to be strategic in how we look at rural roadways and roadways overall. Being mindful and aware of the road to zero and what it means to you as an agency, how you can engage with at the state level, at the MPO level, as the goals are being set for striving to zero. We're going to show a video a little bit later that I hope will help us really think more clearly on that Road to Zero initiative. And then the collaboration that's so important amongst all levels of government and community and stakeholders is to really be working together in terms of moving towards our goals. Bridging the gap in terms of what the National Center on Rural Road Safety has done. So you can see there some of the highlights. There's a link down there to the webinar series. There's a rural webinar series. Hopefully most of you know about that because that's part of what this webinar is part of, is 40 webinars that have occurred over the last few years. There's also research projects, videos, and training that the Rural Safety Center has been putting on, again, emphasizing on rural issues. So there's a great look. So grab that link and take a look at some of that information if you have not participated in that. There's also a partnership between the National Association of County Engineers, this Safety Center, and the Workforce Development, the Safety Workforce Development Group that is partnering on local road safety certification. And that, again, is getting the education out there related to safety. Much of it is focused on rural, not all of it, but again, that certification program is getting up and running, and it's a partnership between, again, the Workforce Development Group, as well as the National Association of County Engineers, Montana LTAP, and the Safety Center. Bridging the gap in terms of intervention. So this slide actually comes from the Centers for Disease Control. It's amazing how much us folks in transportation have overlap with public health. And for those of you that might be with county government, most of you probably have a public health department. And oftentimes, particularly in rural areas, some of the issues that they're dealing with is traffic fatalities and injuries, and those become goals in a public health plan. So leveraging each other in terms of maybe going after grant funds or working together towards those common goals can be very important. So you can see these are the 4 pillars of intervention from the Centers of Disease Control, how they look at safer roads, safer vehicles, safer road users, and improved post-crash response. So we can definitely connect with that. I think one of my aha moments, I know that one of my aha moments from the first summit in 2016 was a presentation that was given by the Centers of Disease Control, and really helped me be aware of the similarities and the common goals that we had related to safety. And the more rural you are, it seems like the more common and the more overlap that you have in terms of addressing rural road safety and addressing public health in rural areas. And even just the connectivity, the walkability of a community, there's overlap there between pedestrian safety, bike safety, and the public health and the livability of the people that live in those communities. So again, looking since 2016, there was the Road to Zero kickoff for the National Safety Council. There was a pilot program that was started with Federal Highway Administration and the National Association of County Engineers related to local road safety plans. Again, many of the counties participating in those pilot programs were rural counties. Not all of them, but we probably had a large majority of the counties participating in developing plans and implementing plans were rural counties. In June of 2018, through the Everyday Counts initiative for federal highways, so now we're in EDC 5, there is a Reducing Rural Roadway Departure initiative that is moving forward. So again, we're going to focus on rural roadway departure crashes, strategies, education, implementation. And so if you're don't know if your state has adopted that or is going to move forward, please let me know and we can get more information to you on that initiative that's going to be going on over the next couple of years. In 2018, August of 2018, National Cooperative Highway Research Program, Project 20-122 is on Rural Transportation Research Roadmap. That project got kicked off, and again, that's going to be looking at rural issues. So if you're interested about that, I think Jaime can provide more information about that as well. And then, of course, leading us to talking more about what was discussed at the summit here in 2018, we're going to get into more details. So the Road to Zero, if you're not familiar with that, that's something that has come from the National Safety Council, but they've got 3 strategies: doubling down on what works, accelerating technology, and prioritizing safety. These are things that I think we can all embrace in terms of what it means to us, but doubling down at works particularly, it resonates with us, or should resonate with us, in terms of looking at the strategies that do work, those low-cost safety improvements like curb signing, chevrons, high-friction surface treatment, things of that nature that really can improve rural road safety. I already mentioned the reducing rural roadway departures. Again, there's a link down there that can get you more information about what's going on with the Everyday Counts initiative. I'm a part of that team. And again, if you've got any questions, please put that in your chat pod. And then here we go. We're going to talk, the rest of the webinar is going to be focusing on the summit in terms of what information was exchanged, what ideas were brought about related to rural road safety. So it was co-hosted with the National Center on Rural Road Safety, which Jaime is a part of, and the National Association of County Engineers, with sponsors, it looks like from Rutgers, from AASHTO, and Lux Solar. But many, many agencies took a role and took a part in presenting. And here's the summit by the numbers. There's 111 attendees representing 28 states in Washington, D.C., and there was 12 different types of stakeholders, so meaning folks from law enforcement, folks from engineering, folks from planning, folks from public health, and all across the board in terms of local agencies, MPOs, RPAs, state DOTs, federal agencies, and other associations that were involved. So there's the group of the folks that were there in Savannah. There was training workshops that were also done in cooperation with the summit. There was the Local Road Safety Plan pilot workshop. There was a training on safety culture, training on low-cost safety improvements, and then systemic safety analysis training. Those are all trainings that the center does do, as well as Federal Highway Administration and National LTAP Association, where those are available. One of the participants even wrote a song about safety, road safety plans, in fact. That was Blair Barnhart from Georgia. And we spent a lot of time engaging with each other, sharing, learning from each other. So if you are interested in any of that training, please let Jaime know or myself know, and we can get you more information on the trainings that were a part of the summit. We're fortunate enough to have Brandy Hedrickson, who is the Deputy Administrator for Federal Highway Administration. She talked a lot about the importance of every life counting and the importance of rural road safety. And a quote that we've highlighted here is, "Good enough is better than perfect." So I think we all should know that if we wait around for the perfect project or the perfect amount of funding or the perfect collaboration or the perfect strategy, we might be waiting a long time. And so sticking with things that we know work, doubling down on what works, has the ability to get us much further, much quicker. And I think that's much more important when we look at the opportunities that we have to make improvements. Small improvements can be good things because it does make a difference. And again, tying it back to every life does count is very important. So these are some of the other speakers that spoke during the opening sessions of the summit. Again, the theme being doubling down on what works and looking at these various agencies, AASHTO, NHTSA, again, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Governor's Highway Safety Administration, the Centers for Disease Control, Federal Highways, National Association of County Engineers, and then also those partnerships, the importance of the partnerships that we have with law enforcement, with other folks in universities, and again, looking at all levels of government and working together to come to safer roadways. So Jaime, I don't see any additional comments in the chat pod right now, but I think we have a poll question.
We do, and so again, if anyone has any questions so far, you can put those over in the chat pod on the left-hand side. We do also have a poll question for you right now, which is, which of the following was not a rural safety success since the 2016 summit? The Local Road Safety Plan pilot conducted as part of EDC 4, reducing rural roadway departures announced as EDC 5 innovation, the NCHRP 20-122 Rural Transportation Research Roadmap beginning, the Towards Zero Deaths beginning, I don't know or I don't remember. And I do want to apologize as well, when Hillary showed the slide that had the sponsors on it, it does look like when we uploaded it, one of those logos did not appear. One of our other sponsors was Cambridge Systematics, so I do want to give them a shout out as well. So thank you to all of our sponsors for the summit. We'll give everyone just a couple seconds to go ahead and fill out these poll questions. Okay, it doesn't look like we have anyone else answering, so I'm going to go ahead and broadcast this for you, Hillary.
All right, thank you, Jamie. So the Towards Zero Deaths, not to be confused with the Road to Zero initiative, actually started, that was the one that I mentioned, started back in 2009 in AASHTO. That was an AASHTO initiative. So the Towards Zero Deaths began back in 2009, and then the Road to Zero Coalition was the one that I had mentioned that was initiated in 2018, I believe. 2018, I think I've got that right. So again, I know it's hard to, there's kind of alphabet soup here what was going on, but we've been talking about Towards Zero Deaths for a long time, and I think majority of the state DOTs have adopted a Road to Zero, Towards Zero Deaths, Vision Zero to some extent, and we're seeing more and more local agencies adopting a variation of that as well. Cities, we've got some counties that are moving forward with that, really realizing that it takes all of us to get to zero. So Jamie, I think I'm turning it back over to you at this point in time to dig into more details about the summit.
Yep, thank you, Hillary. And so as Hillary mentioned, we are going to go into depth on the different pieces that were discussed at our summit. And as she mentioned too, one of those 3 strategies that came out of the Road to Zero was the doubling down on what works. And we heard this as one of the evaluations of the summit, the first summit as well. The first summit tended to focus a lot more on figuring out what some of those challenges were that we could possibly find solutions to. And so one of the evaluation pieces that came out was a request from everyone that if we did have a follow-up summit, that they would like to see more solutions and case studies and best practices on what has happened and what resources are out there to try and help with some of those challenges that exist in rural areas. So we really took that to heart, and we worked on this summit as being a lot of those pieces, providing a lot of those resources, but as Hillary mentioned as well, opening up that discussion with others so that we could find out what other people are doing across the country that might be applicable in our areas as well. And so along with the fact that you guys had requested us to do this after Summit number 1, we also loved that it was one of the main points that came out of the Road to Zero report too, is that doubling down on things that work and looking at those countermeasures that we already know can help. And so when we talk about countermeasures that work, Carmen Hayes from NHTSA went through the 4-step process for that, and that's to identify what they are, analyze, select the appropriate countermeasures for those areas that are having issues, and then provide communication and outreach on them. And so from there, we had all of those speakers that Hillary mentioned in the first 2 sessions talk a lot about what they have to offer and what resources are out there for state and local agencies that you guys can take part in. And I do want to mention now that down in the left-hand corner in the handout pod, along with the PDF of the slides for today that we always provide to you, there is also a PDF handout of all the resources. So what we've done is we've taken the resources out of everybody's PowerPoint presentations from the summit and put them into one document so that and we've categorized them for you too, so that it will be very easy hopefully for you to find those and click on those links and be able to get all of these documents that are referenced. They're also available at the very end of this presentation. We will not be going through those slides, but again, if you download just the PDF version of these slides instead of the handouts, after our ending slide, you'll find that the slides do continue on and all of those resource links are there available for you as well. So our doubling down session that happened Wednesday afternoon, we had 6 speakers that represented 7 agencies, and you can see the different logos up on the screen. Then as Hillary mentioned, we also had that Successes, Partnerships, Projects, and Deployments piece where we had 5 different speakers representing 4 different perspectives, and they represented law enforcement, emergency services, tribal, and freight. And so from that, what we heard from them, just a big snapshot overview for you guys, is that there have been 2 local road safety plan pilot workshops that have been done by NACE and FHWA, and those are really hands-on workshops that counties can work together, be instructed on what those pieces are that that do make up a local road safety plan and actually work on them as a hands-on workshop. And the second pilot for this was held at the summit, one of the beginning meetings for it, and they are going to be continuing that on with a final meeting happening at the NACE annual meeting here in another couple of months. There was also 2 analyses for state fatality data that were showcased by GHSA, and those were for pedestrians and for motorcyclists. And so that data is available on the GHSA website. Again, all of these links to these documents and resources you can find in those handouts in the bottom left-hand corner. We also discussed 3 everyday counts innovations that FHWA has that are really relevant to rural safety. And those include the data-driven safety analysis, DDSA. That is one of the ones that is working on the local road safety plan pilot. They talked a lot about safe transportation for every pedestrian, or the STEP program. And then we talked a lot about the one that Hillary mentioned earlier, which is specifically on rural, and that's reducing rural roadway departures. And that one is part of EDC 5 and is just getting started. So a lot of the resources and trainings and technical assistance for that roadway departure one are going to be starting up here soon. And again, if you do need more information on any 3 of those Everyday Counts programs, please let us know. We also discussed the 3 Road to Zero strategies, the doubling down on what works, as well as the other 2 that Hillary pointed out earlier. We talked about the Center for Disease Control also talked about 7 data resource tools that they have available to us to use. And so we talk a lot about not having a lot of data and it being very hard to come by, and that is absolutely true, especially in a rural area. But sometimes if we look outside the box, we can find some data from other sources that may be useful, although it may not be exactly what you want. It could help you in telling your story. And so one of the ones that we learned about in the first summit was that we really need to look to our public health partners. And Center for Disease Control has some of this data that may be useful to us. Some of these data resource tools that they talked about, one is called the Web-Based Injury Statistics Query and Reporting System, or WISCRS. And then there's also a couple of surveys that they do, one on behavioral risk and one on youth risk, and those both include transportation questions in them, such as, have you ever been in a car with someone who's been drinking or driving? Do you wear your seatbelt? Those types of behavioral statistics that we could use. They do also have an intervention and cost calculator that they have available, as well as several others. So again, in the handout section, there's a specific slide that we've created that is just called CDC Data Resource Tools, and it lists the link for where you can find all 7 of these. So you can peruse those and see if maybe some of that data might be useful for you in your locality or state. We also talked about Towards Zero Deaths is now hosting 10 webinars on their roadmap to implementation. And so they've had this project going on for how to implement Towards Zero Deaths in your state or locality. And so between January and June, they've got 10 webinars going on through AASHTO on how to implement Towards Zero Deaths. And those can be found on the Towards Zero Deaths website under their resources. You can sign up to attend those. They will also be having 2 in-person trainings on this as well. One will be held at the Lifesavers Conference, which is coming up soon, and the other one will be held at the Institute of Transportation Engineers Conference. So if you happen to be going to either of those, we would highly suggest that you sign up for those in-person workshops as well. We heard about Road to Zero providing 18 grants for over $2.5 million to help with safety, and one of those was provided to the National Association of County Engineers. And we're lucky enough that next month for March, on the 28th, we will have Brian Roberts, who is a consultant and the past executive director for NACE, who will be coming to speak with us about the results of that Road to Zero grant that NACE received, and talk about all of the data that they were able to collect from some of the states on their localities with that funding from Road to Zero. So we hope to see you at our March webinar, which will talk about the outcomes of that project as well. We also heard about the 20 proven safety countermeasures that FHWA has, and if you see all those circles up on the right-hand side of your screen right now, those are the 20 proven safety countermeasures. And you'll notice that 6 of those are newer ones that were released this year. So each of those has a specific web page on the FHWA site and has additional information on how you can implement those countermeasures in your locality. There's also a Countermeasures That Work document that NHTSA has, which provides over 50 countermeasures more on the behavioral side. So we have the FHWA ones on the engineering side and the NHTSA ones on the behavioral side. And that document, again, we've provided a link to that at the end of the presentation as well, so you can take a look at it. And at this point, I'm going to stop and ask one more poll question and see if anyone has any questions before I delve further into the 10 cross-group sessions that we had. So this question is true or false. The document in the handout pod, the bottom left corner, contains web links to many resources discussed at the summit. Okay, and I can see that everyone was paying attention, so I appreciate that. It is true, there is that document down there that has all of the web links, and you guys can feel free to download that. Also, if you, as I mentioned again, if you download the PDF version of these slides, they are all available at the end as well. And I really do feel like it would be a great thing to have in your library. There's over 30 different resource links available to you. And even if some of them won't work for you, we do hope that there are some that will be useful as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the 10 different sessions that we had now, and they were all on very different topics. And again, these resources are available to you as well. I'll provide to you at the end of this presentation the link for both the first summit and the second summit. They're both on the Safety Center's website. We have as many of the presentations for the first summit available to you as we can. For the second summit, I have all but 2 presentations available to you. So all of the slides that you're about to see and the information in here, I am by no means an expert on all of these topics, so I'm just going to go over very high-level overview of these topics. But the slides that the presenters gave are available on our website. So you can go, if you hear something in what we're about to talk about that you say that would be really great to learn more about, those slides are available. And if you would like to talk to the presenters more, if you let us know, we can get you in touch with them as well. So these first 5 are the ones that we had that went on in the morning of Thursday, and I'm going to go through them one at a time. Our first one was Advancing Local Road Safety with State DOTs and Locals. And Hillary mentioned this before, and I think we've mentioned it a couple times, that the local road safety plans are a part of the Everyday Counts DDSA program. They're a part of a pilot that has been going on with FHWA and NACE on helping counties get the number of local road safety plans that exist up and trying to make this easy for them to create their own. And so a local road safety plan involves all of the E's, not just the engineering, so all 4, engineering, education, enforcement, and emergency services. It is a 6-step process for local road safety plans. You'll see the infographic that's over on the right-hand side of the screen is one of the ways that we talk about how to do a local road safety plan. But our 6 steps are to establish leadership, to analyze your safety data, to determine your emphasis areas, to identify your strategies, to prioritize and incorporate those strategies, and then to evaluate and update the local road safety plan. And so there is a document that has been created on how you can go about creating a local road safety plan, as well as this infographic that shows some of the steps. There is also a video that's been put together as well, and we did provide that YouTube link to you on this screen, so we hope you'll take some time later and go ahead and watch that and see how a local road safety plan can benefit you and how you can put one together. Partners that you can use for doing a local road safety plan include your local technical assistance program, FHWA, NACE's safety committee, and then the APWA safety committee as well. And so again, at the end of this presentation, there are 2 slides actually just specifically dedicated to local road safety plans and all of the different resources that are available to you on how to go about doing this. Participants who sat in on this session were able to start developing their own local road safety plan and start writing down some bullet points for how they may proceed through these different 6 steps. The second session was on collaboration and how to get people to the table and broaden your stakeholder groups. And through this one, we had our presenters talked about the 5 I's of stakeholder involvement, and that's identifying your stakeholders, inviting them to participate, informing them of the issue, involving them in the process, and improving the process. And they talked a lot about the tips for inviting stakeholders. That was one of the challenges that came out of this session for many of the people who attended it. And so they spoke a lot about the best ways for doing that is to make sure you provide the purpose of the meeting and why they would be a stakeholder, but also making it personal to the person that you want to attend and become a stakeholder. Demonstrating the benefits to them, what's in it for them, and why should they help, and why should they be involved. And then identifying their responsibilities up front so that they know exactly what it is that you expect of them. The people who attended this session also walked through 2 scenario exercises so that they were shown how they could invite stakeholders and also who to pick as stakeholders for their different projects that they may have. And participant takeaways from this one was, again, how to broaden your stakeholder group. So there are also slides available for that session as well. The third one was on workforce and integrating safety into your agency's workforce development. They talked a lot about workforce development for the current employees and things that exist already, such as the Safety Circuit Rider Program, LTAP's Road Scholar Program, which is available, and then as Hillary was talking about earlier, the Local Road Safety Certificate Program that is currently being worked on by the Safety Center and NACE, the West Region Transportation Workforce Center, and Montana LTAP. They also talked about what the core competencies are for transportation safety professionals, and then they discussed a document that came out of NACO on how to recruit, retain, and then also some retirement strategies as well. That NACO document that provides a lot of tips and strategies is available in the handout section as well. They talked about some case studies and how Utah DOT has coordinated with Brigham Young University and how the California Office of Traffic Safety is coordinating with their California state universities to make sure that safety is a big part of the curriculums that are in those 2 universities and providing them with staff and how they can get their workforce to understand safety the way they need them to. So the participant takeaway for this one was strategies and resources for current and new employees. Our 4th session was one of our most popular, and this one was on marketing safety and how to tell your story and develop an elevator speech. And this one, they talked about 5 safety marketing tips, and those were to start with the why, to visualize, to use analogies, to ask questions, and then to get emotional. They talked about the fact that marketing is an ongoing conversation. It's not just something that you start with once and then walk away and forget for the rest. You have to continue to talk about safety and why it's needed and what those benefits are. They also talked about the fact that teasers are a great way to get that conversation started. And on the right-hand side right now, you can see our trainer for that day, some of his teasers. And he talked about the fact that one way to do it is to start with statistics. So you'll see his top one says, about 80 people would die on the roads today. My job is to help it be fewer tomorrow. To purposely use non-specific phrases. So his example was, I'm a transportation translator. One of my favorite ones that got mentioned at the summit also was that instead of being an engineer, someone said his elevator speech was going to be talking about the fact that he's an engineer. And that really resonated with me, and I really love that. And then the third one is to talk about long-term benefits. And so the example here is, I use communication to help you get home safely at the end of the day. So I do want to let everyone know that there is a handout that went with this particular session. So along with the presentation being available, there is also the handout which has questions and will help you start the process of creating your own elevator speech. That is available on our website. we also, because this was such a highly sought after session, we have asked the trainer to do this as our April webinar as well. So this session will be available at the NACE annual meeting in April, and then the week after that it will be available as the Safety Center's April webinar. So for anyone that's either attending NACE or for anyone that joins us for all of our webinars, please sign up. It was a fantastic session, and everyone seemed to walk away with a lot of great ways to begin that conversation and really talk about what safety is and why it's beneficial and why it should be a priority. And then our fifth session for the morning was talking about using what you have where you are, ideas for pooling resources and funding. And so again, that's based off that quote that Hillary had mentioned at the very beginning that we talked about a lot in Summit number 1 as well. And so our first speaker was from Iowa DOT, and she talked a lot about a funding exchange program and how in Iowa they allow their local jurisdictions to exchange their federal funds with the DOT for primary road funds. So essentially they're having the same amount of funding as being subject to federal requirements after the swap as before. However, it does benefit both parties. So Iowa DOT finds that they can utilize those federal funds in a more efficient manner, and it lowers their oversight requirements. Whereas for the local jurisdictions, it really reduces their project costs and delays. And so they found that this is very beneficial. And she did provide a detailed description of how they go about doing this and what some more benefits and examples are. And that presentation, again, is available on our website, too. We then had a speaker talk about pooling resources and how to do that. And she talked a lot about case studies. So she had 3 in particular. She went over one from Kansas DOT, one from Natchez Trace Parkway, and another from Idaho DOT. And some of the key takeaways that she had from the case studies that she talked about were that partnerships, collaboration, and volunteerism expand the DOT's reach and capacity. She also talked about how funding can come from unexpected places, how if you have a really engaged management, you can come up with some outside-the-box solutions. And then she talked about pilot projects being a great way to test solutions and make sure that they're going to work for your locality. And lastly, creative thinking can lead to partnerships. And so all of these more detailed information on the case studies, if that's something that you're interested in, you can take a look at those. So then in the afternoon, we had 5 additional cross-group sessions. And again, I'll go through some of the key takeaways from each of these sessions. The first one was cultivating a non-urban lens, the quality of service and performance metrics sensitive to rural areas. And at the beginning of today's webinar, Hillary talked about that as well, and that's one of the key things that came out of our first summit was that we really want to cultivate this non-urban lens and be able to talk about it as a way that we can not look at apples and oranges, but that we can look at rural itself. And so our trainers talked about rural versus urban lens, and they talked about things such as the regulatory and risk expectations in rural versus urban, and the infrastructure conditions and the atypical geometry that you find a lot of the time in a rural area, or the difference in rural priorities and quality of life that may exist between a rural and urban area, feasibility of doing projects, the public priorities, which tend to be different in those areas, and then unique issues, which again, Hillary touched on a little bit at the beginning, so the wildlife and the heavy freight hauling. And so they discussed these along with what a qualitative approach could be, because again, we've talked several times about the fact that data is one of those things along with funding that we just don't have enough of in a rural area. So you can use that qualitative data as well and use anecdotal evidence to tell your story, and then that's valid and that's okay. Even if our urban counterparts have, what data they think they need, we may not have it, and so it's okay for us to use that qualitative data. They also talked about promoting underused resources. things such as the LTAP centers in your state, your universities that probably do research, and then making sure that you're talking to your DOTs and your rural planning organizations and councils of governments and seeing what they can do to help you as well. They talked about 2 specific examples for these types of rural performance metrics. One is the California Rural Counties project that's currently going on, and another one is the National Park Service Safety Management System program as well. And so more detailed information on both of those case studies can be found in the full PowerPoint. And participants from this session were able to take away some draft rural-based service metrics. And I do want to go back, Hillary, thank you for putting that link into the chat pod. When I was talking about the Iowa DOT funding swap, we did host a webinar through the Safety Center in August that Iowa DOT and FHWA did on local safety funding options. And the archive of that webinar can be found on our website at the link that Hillary has posted. And that gives more details as well on how Iowa DOT does that funding swap if anyone would like to listen to that webinar. So another session that we had in the afternoon was innovative ideas for shifting rural safety culture and addressing the human behavior problem to get to zero. So one of the things that the Safety Center has really made a priority for doing is the safety culture research and moving that forward. And so we have done 2 projects here at the Safety Center. We've created an Introduction to Safety Culture video, which you can find the link for at the bottom of this slide. And then we've also put together a training that was piloted pre-summit this year and is currently being adjusted a little bit and will be given again at NACE at their conference in April. And so with safety culture being such a big part of what the Safety Center has done, we did also provide a session on this for those who weren't able to attend the pre-summit training. And our trainers talked about the fact that to change behaviors, you have to change your beliefs. And that there are 7 steps for growing safety culture, and those 7 steps you can see on your screen right now. They're over on the right-hand side. They include plan and advocate, assess, prioritize, identify strategies, pilot and rethink, implement, and evaluate. And then they talked about, we had a speaker come from Chatham County, which was the county that we were hosting the summit in, and they talked a lot about the program that they've put together and how they've really incorporated safety culture into their organization. The Safety Center has also hosted several different webinars on organizational safety culture as well. If you're interested in those, you can find them on our archived website too. But they really do talk about how to do what Chatham County has done and how to make sure that if you're going to talk about safety, that it really needs to come from your organization first, and that it needs to be a priority in your organization, and make sure that all of your rules and your goals that you have, that that you're walking the walk and not just talking it as well. And people in the public, they're going to tend to engage in safety more frequently if they see you doing it first. And so that's one of the things that came out of this safety culture session. There is a handout, again, for this safety culture session as well. It's a couple pages long, which describes a lot of the same techniques and ideas that are in the video link, and that can be found on our website right under the PowerPoint presentation for this. It also walks you through some exercises on how you can go ahead and figure out how to implement safety culture in your organization as well. The third session that we ran was on innovative rural safety research and what is needed to get rural to zero. And this one is directly feeding back into the project that Hillary mentioned earlier, which is the NCHRP 20-122 Rural Transportation Research Roadmap. This research roadmap is going to be used to identify which projects should be pushed forward through the NCHRP process to be researched on rural. There are about 15 different transportation themes that have been come up with for this project, one of which is safety. And we were lucky enough that by hosting a stakeholder meeting at the summit, we were able to get 30 additional safety research needs that people who attended the session came up with for us. So that was a really great way to get additional information. There will be a fifth and final stakeholder meeting for the Rural Research Roadmap, and that's going to be held next Thursday, March 7th from 2 to 3:30 p.m. Eastern. The registration link is showing on your screen right now. That is open and available to anyone who thinks that they have rural research needs that they would like to include, whether they be safety-minded or any of our other 14 themes, which include all modes, all rural communities. So if there's anything that you say, it would really help out if we had research on this specific topic, we'd love to hear that from you and love to have you attend that webinar and get your input in. The fourth session that we had in the afternoon was an intersection for public health and transportation. And this session really talked a lot about the leading causes of death, and that you're more likely to die from the 5 leading causes of death in a rural area than our urban counterparts, with those leading causes being heart disease, cancer, chronic lower respiratory disease, stroke, and unintentional injury, which includes all of the transportation pieces. They also talked about the fact that many people rely on walking, biking, and transit out of necessity, not just to improve their public health. He spoke a lot about the 3 environmental characteristics associated with high levels of active transportation, those being high density of street networks, network connectivity, and street configuration and design, and how all 3 of those also have positive health outcomes for local areas as well. So participants were able to take away resources for increasing opportunities for active transportation. You can see that there are some snippets on the right-hand side of slides that they presented, including opportunities in rural communities for walking and biking and how that may change, and then some explanations about how bicyclists aren't all the same. You do have those bicyclists who bike every day and have no fear, and then you have the other side, which are the bicyclists who are biking with families and would rather be in a separated path. And so they went through all of these pieces, as well as a lot of resources for how to implement some of these solutions and how to really incorporate the active transportation into your transportation plan. So I would encourage you, again, if this is something you're looking for, to go ahead and take a look at his presentation, which is available on the Summit's website. Along the same thought process, there was just a webinar that we did in January on bicycling. There was another one in August that we did on bicycling, and then the multimodal guide is what that slide in the center is from, and there was also a webinar that we did on that multimodal guide as well. So if you take a look through our archive training website, you can find all of those, and if you do need any help locating them in particular, just send me an email and I will get you those specific links. And then our last session that we had that afternoon was on systemic safety and how to implement rural-specific solutions under rural constraints. And so we had an FHWA trainer was talking about the systemic approach and how that is to deploy low-cost countermeasures at locations with the greatest risk. He talked about using qualitative ratings when needed. Again, if you don't have that data, we need you to do what you can with what you have, and so qualitative is the best way to do that if you don't have quantitative data. He talked a lot about decisions to implement a strategy and how those should always consider what the effectiveness of the strategy might be. And then he provided case study examples from South Carolina and Minnesota. So again, if you'd like to see those examples, you can take a look at the more detailed PowerPoint for that. You'll also see the infographic that's showing up on the right-hand side of your screen on what the systemic approach is. Again, along with most of these, there is a specific slide at the very end of this presentation and in the handouts, which provides you with a handbook on what the systemic approach is. It provides you with the link to this infographic with a lot of different resources for the systemic safety approach. And at this point, I think I just threw a lot of information at you, so I'm going to do another poll and also see if we might have any questions. If you do have any questions, you can put those in the chat pod over on the left-hand side. And for you guys, the questions that we have for you, these aren't true or false questions at this point, or multiple choice. These ones are open-ended. So we'd like to know, based on what we just went through with you, who is the person or agency that you think you need to form a relationship with to influence safety and move your area forward from where you currently are in the safety arena? And the second one is, how can you expand your influence in your state so that safety is up front and there is a unified voice? So we'll give everyone just a few minutes to think about that and put in some answers. And so it looks like for some of the people or agencies that you can form a relationship with, we've got the county stakeholders, county commissioners, transit providers, the public. Those are all excellent answers. And then how to expand your influence, to do public presentations, more outreach, knowing the resources better so that you can communicate them, absolutely. And so again, we would recommend that everyone watch for the invitation to come out about our April webinar, which will be on marketing safety. We'd love to have you guys all attend those. Okay, we've got some more for expanding your influence, making the pilot LRSPs available to other counties, using newsletters, billboards, and articles in the paper, speaking where possible at groups, promoting the statistics to promote the problem. Perfect. Okay, great. Thank you, guys. These are all fantastic answers. And it looks like we do not have any questions yet, so I am going to move on to the last section of our presentation. But if you do have any questions, please go ahead and put those in the chat pod before we finish up here. Okay, so a few more things that we do want to share with you. We had some speakers that spent a lot of their time talking about noteworthy practices, and we really felt that these were things we wanted to share with you as well so that you can go ahead and get more information on these. And so in our Doubling Down session, we had a NHTSA presenter who spoke about Georgia's noteworthy practices. And she spoke about a few of these programs that they've put into place. One of them is Operation Southern Shield, and this is a week-long speed enforcement program that they've put together. She spoke a little bit about their Operation Lifesaver, which is to prevent highway rail crossing fatalities. She talked about their Yield Behind the Wheel program, which is to help with farm equipment crashes, and then their distracted driving laws that they've put into place in Georgia. So if any of those sound like something that are of interest to you, you can take a look at her presentation. Again, it would be the NHTSA presentation that happened in the Doubling Down session. Another one that we wanted to talk about from our partnership session, which happened Wednesday afternoon, was from the Sheriff's Association in New York. And he shared a few of the amazing things that they're doing as well. They have their Move Over Law, but then they also have their Survivor Advocate Speakers Program, where they pay survivor advocates to go out and speak to teen drivers and really use that emotional side of it to make an impact on the teens. They also have a No Empty Chair program, which you can see the flyer for over there on the right-hand side of your screen. And that one is an awareness campaign for both prom and graduation, saying that, you know, we need to make sure that we're not having fatalities. We don't want that empty chair there at the prom or the graduation. Another program that he talked about, which really hit home for a lot of people, was the Coaches Care program. And this is where they ask coaches to talk to their sports teams about highway safety. They really felt like this was a bigger impact to the teens than just a law enforcement person going and talking to them, because their coach really is that role model for them, and that advice that they're getting from their coach may be heard more. And so a reminder as they're leaving practice that we know you haven't looked at your phone all school day and all practice, but don't look at it as you're driving home. You know, make sure you get home safely. They also talked about the Below 100 program that they have, And this is to get law enforcement deaths below 100 in a calendar year. There hasn't been that in 75 years. So in 75 years, the deaths for law enforcement have always been over 100, the traffic deaths. So, and they pointed out that these traffic deaths are just as high as the gun-related deaths for law enforcement, and that's something that not everyone thinks about. You think more often that with the dangerous situations that they're put in, that it's the gun-related deaths, but in reality, they're both about equal. Another noteworthy practice that was talked about was from South Carolina DOT, and we had Brian Jones from South Carolina DOT come and speak with us as our lunch keynote speaker. He came to talk about some of the work that him and his colleagues have been doing, and one of his colleagues actually won the AASHTO 2018 President's Award for this project, which is the South Carolina DOT Rural Road Safety Program. So they have a specific program dedicated just to rural roads, and they're really doubling down on what works by creating this rural specific program. It is a 10-year program with over $50 million a year. That funding comes from the state gas tax and was approved in spring of 2017. So he talked a lot about where they began and how they began to choose what roads and what systemic countermeasures they were going to put in. And then he talked about what their benefits have been and what they've accomplished in that first phase. And so they had established a goal of doing 100 miles of projects per year, and in their first year they were able to do 182 total rural miles improved in that first year. So that was really a great way to do a doubling down on what works. And again, the full presentation for what Brian talked about is available on our website if you'd like to get more information on that project. So we wanted to leave you with a few additional things. We had some memorable quotes, just like those ones that Hillary talked about from Summit number 1. We had a few of those come out of Summit number 2 as well. And the first one is that safety in rural America is not going to get better unless somebody does something. And that was said by Marie Walsh from Louisiana LTAP. She also said, if we don't make a change, we'll never move the dial to shift the culture and improve safety. So those were the same types of sentiments that we had from that first summit, where we talked a lot about safety culture and making sure that we can try and impress upon that. And Brandy Hendrickson, when she spoke, talked a lot about how we have made some improvements and we have moved the dial, but we haven't moved it enough yet, because there are still those fatalities, and those fatalities there's a face to those, and there's it's someone that you know in your rural area. And so making sure that we continue on and continue these partnerships and looking for resources that are available. Linda McIntyre from the National Park Service said people in this room are gateways to resources and partnerships. And Hillary talked about that at the very beginning of our webinar too, that really was our goal for this summit and for the other summit as well, was that we wanted to put everyone in a room so that we could learn from others and broaden our knowledge on rural road safety. So as much as we can do these presentations and have people talk and sit and listen, a lot of the time it was the discussions that were able to be had and learning what resources were out there and what other partnerships could be made. And we hope that today's webinar, that we've brought a snippet of that back to you guys who weren't able to attend, and that we've distilled this information down so that you can learn some of these resources that are available to you and find out more. One of the other key things that I really loved that Hillary said was about innovation. So we talk a lot about innovation and how we all think that it has to be the new greatest thing, like the car that's driving itself. But really, when you think about innovation, if you haven't done it before, if it's new to you, then it's an opportunity and it's innovative. So it doesn't matter what everyone else is doing, but if you haven't done it before, then it's innovative. So if we have that mindset, that can help us to do those little improvements all along if we're not aiming for the big thing at the end, and that, that self-driving car. And then another key thing that Hillary also said that I loved was when we were talking about Towards Zero Deaths, and Marie Walsh from Louisiana LTAP was talking about the fact that Towards Zero Deaths started in Savannah, Georgia, in 2009, and now when we had this summit, it was almost 2019, which was 10 years, and look how far we've come. And so Hillary said maybe 10 years from now we'll look back on Savannah and the Safety Summit #2, and we'll be able to tell a different rural road safety story, similar to how they're able to for Towards Zero Deaths. And so that's also a key point, is that we have to continue on, and that hopefully we'll be able to change that rural road safety story and make improvements. One of the things that we're going to ask you to do is the same thing that we did at the summit. And Mike Griffith from FHWA was one of our first speakers after we had our welcoming session. And he challenged everyone to write down 3 action items at the summit. And so 3 things you were going to take away and that you were going to do after the fact. We're going to only ask you to do 1 because you didn't attend the whole summit. You've only attended our hour-and-a-half webinar. But Hillary, during her closing session, wrapped it back up for us at the summit and handed out index cards and asked everyone to write down their 3 action items. And then she had everyone share them so that we could see what other people were saying. And so just a few of them that are up on the screen right now: to work on messaging and how to tell my safer story better, to find what ways to help counties that have no technical capabilities, to get to know local practitioners in my jurisdiction, because I know more about the engineers at the summit in this room than in my own hometown, to identify additional low-budget, simple, easy-to-use marketing strategies that already exist for safety, and to practice covering my own press conferences and road opening ceremonies. We had heard a couple others about the New York State Sheriff's presentation and how that one really resonated, and that a gentleman was going to work with his charitable employees and local law enforcement to donate car seats. We heard about one of the consultants said that they work a lot with local road safety plans across the country, but hadn't thought about volunteering to help with their local jurisdictions plan, and they were going to do that when they left. The marketing session recommended reading Good in a Room. So they talked about downloading and reading that book, and then developing a monthly safety message to leave with others when I speak to them. And if I do it consistently, this can help spread that safety message. And someone else didn't realize that there was a traffic records coordinating committee in each state, so they were going to contact them to get additional data as well. So before we do leave you, we did want to show you a very quick video, as Hillary mentioned earlier. And this was played at the summit as well. So I'm going to let Dana take over right now and show that video.
Thanks, Jamie. I'm going to try one thing. I'm going to pause the audio on the phones for just a moment and make sure that we can hear this, and then I'll turn it back on. So if everyone could, if you have computer speakers, if you could please make sure those are on. Your phones are muted. Jamie and Hillary, if you could mute your phones. Manually, and we'll see if this will work.
Now, what do you think would be a more acceptable number?
Okay, thank you, Dana. And for those of you, I'm unsure if that sound came through for everyone, but Hillary has put the link to the video in the chat pod. We also do have the link in the PowerPoint presentation as well. We would recommend that you watch it again on your own as well. It is a very powerful message where they're asking the gentleman how many road fatalities does he think is okay, and he says 17, and then they bring in his family as those 17 people. So it's a very, very powerful message about what is the right number, and the right number is 0. And that's where he gets to at the end of that video. So some of the key takeaways from the session, our biggest one was really finding your voice and telling your story, being relentless in how you tell that story. As was said in the marketing session, making sure that it's an ongoing story that you're telling, and that you're not just telling it once, because we really do want to continue to strive for 0, making sure that we know that those fatalities, again, are linked to a person and a story, and there's no one person that someone else isn't going to miss. And when Hillary was talking earlier about the rural story and talking about understanding the magnitude of it, so one of the things she closed our summit with as well was that what we do really is worth it, because remember, while we were sitting here in the past hour and a half, those 2 people died on rural roads. So that's a very powerful statement, and the magnitude of that is huge. So what you're doing every day, the little bit that you're doing to try and be empowered and making sure that you're making a day-to-day strive for safety to be a priority is huge, and it is impactful. And so we'd love to leave you with that at this point. I will close out with any questions if anyone may have any, and I am going to put up our last poll question real quick for you guys on what your one action item might be. Dana, can you actually do it? I can't see that 6th poll question. And then I know we're getting to the end of our time here. I will also provide you guys with the links for Summit number 1 and Summit number 2. At the end, they are, again, available in the handout pod. But so this poll question is, after listening to this webinar, please share with us one action item that you can do to improve rural road safety in your jurisdiction. And again, I know that we've tried to provide you all with a recap of what happened at the summit over that day and a half, and hopefully we've given you enough tidbits to pique your interest. And we do hope that you will go back and take a look at not only the Bridging the Gap Summit number 2 presentations and handouts that are available to you, but also to check out Summit number 1's website as well and take a look at some of those presentations that were given there too. We'd also like to remind you that every day counts 5, and that reducing rural roadway departures is starting up and starting to do their trainings and their technical assistance. And if that's something that you would like more information about and want to know more about those opportunities that will exist there, if you can contact either Hillary or myself, we can get you in touch with the right people. I also do want to remind you again as well about our upcoming webinars. We do hope that the webinar series are helpful to you. As Hillary mentioned, we've had over 40 of them so far, and all of those 40 are archived on our website and available to you. You are available to receive CEUs and certificates of completion for watching archived videos as well. Right under the archived link for each one is a survey that you can fill out to request that certificate and CEU. So those are available to you as well. And then in March, as I mentioned, we will be co-hosting our next webinar with NACE and with the Road to Zero and National Safety Council, and that will be providing you with the outcomes of NACE's Road to Zero grant. And then our April webinar will be co-hosted with the National LTAP group, and that one will be on marketing safety, and so we hope that you'll all join us for that too. So it looks like, as far as action items that you guys have after this webinar, some of them are to find ways to help your local community that has no technical abilities, to provide wider range of resources to local jurisdictions, to determine priority rural road safety issues and most appropriate countermeasures, be more vocal, to determine your priorities, to make sure your safety message is getting to the public, to talk more and encourage others to drive carefully. A lot of these are about communication, and that's phenomenal. To be proactive about providing local road safety plan knowledge and expertise, increasing communication, volunteering, working with your county road folks, better condition signs, and improving your data collection. And so again, a lot of these different pieces that you guys have talked about, there are resources available at the end of our presentation for a lot of these. So I hope that you'll take some time and scroll through those and see which ones might be of use to you. And again, if you do need any assistance, please make sure that you contact the Safety Center and also Hillary, and I'll leave you with our email addresses at the end of today's presentation. So for this webinar, I hope that you have learned to summarize why rural road safety should be a priority, to identify the successes in moving rural America since Summit number 1, to restate the resources for implementing safety measures at home, to understand the key takeaways from the 10 concurrent sessions, and to list the next steps and action items. And again, now on your screen, you'll see the 2 links for Summit number 2 and Summit number 1. And again, those have all of the PowerPoint presentations that we were able to provide to you are available there, as well as some of those handouts. And then again, the upcoming webinars that we have, as well as our link for our archived webinars. And here are our email addresses if you do have additional questions. The one question that we did get through the chat pod was about whether or not there would be another summit and if another one is planned. And at this point, we are unsure as to whether another one will occur. We're hopeful that there will be a third summit. Generally, they've been happening every 2 years, so if we do have another one, we hope that it would occur in 2020. So just keep your eyes out for more information about that for when we know. We'll make sure that you guys know as well. So Hillary, did you have any final thoughts before we close out the webinar?
I just want to thank everyone for participating today, and particularly for those of you that engaged on the poll questions. I hope this was food for thought for you. Please take advantage of the resources that there are out there. I actually have already, because Jaime did a nice job of putting all the resources on one page, I had them all scattered about myself. I actually sent that to my team. I've got a team of 16 people that I work with in safety and design, and I sent it to them and said, hey, this is a great resource. Let's be using this. So thanks, Jaime, for a great summary today. And let us know what we can do to help support you, both Federal Highways and the Rural Safety Center. And good luck to everyone, and be safe.
Thank you, everyone, again for attending. And again, if you have colleagues that you'd like to share this presentation with, it should be up on our website within the week. So you can make sure you can